It's episode 152, and my nerd world, welcome to it, a Star Wars podcast, last show of 2018. This week's show is brought to you by Mack Weldon, where you can save 20% off your first order by using the promo code MNW at MackWeldon.com. More details on that. Also brought to you by Embark, the critically acclaimed brand new space opera novel written by your host, Jon Justice, available now on Amazon. We'll talk more about that a little bit later on in the show. This week on the show, however, we're going to talk about the latest rumors surrounding Episode 9, the lack of any marketing taking place so far. We'll also get into Force ghosting, old ideas that George Lucas had that could play into Episode 9, and why the sequel trilogy, Episodes 7, 8, and 9, were always going to be Reylo, a Star Wars story.
Nothing will stand in our way.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
I will finish what you started.
Who are you?
I'm no one. There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
The Force. It's calling to you.
May the Force be with us.
My nerd world.
Just let it in.
Ojaba. Why does she get a blaster and I don't? Ojaba.
We'll also get into listener feedback. I failed to mention that at the opening of the show this week. I hope you've had a fantastic holiday. I've been on vacation for the past week or so. I don't go back to work until January 3rd, which is a really good thing because it's been a good vacation so far, but oddly stressful. But I don't want to get into that on a Star Wars podcast. We want to talk about Star Wars. Was watching A New Hope yesterday, and it's pretty amazing how unbelievably entertaining that movie still is after all this time. Like, shot for shot, the attack on the Death Star at the end of A New Hope is still one of the best, if not the best, space battle scene ever put to screen. I mean, look, there's other good space battles. The opening of Revenge of the Sith is fantastic, and I know a lot of people point towards Return of the Jedi as being the best space battle in Star Wars ever, and I do like the Return of the Jedi space battle, although I will say that, and I've made this comment before, that I really do wish that they had spent as much time on upgrading Return of the Jedi as they did A New Hope for the special editions. I know they didn't need to mess with Return of the Jedi nearly as much because the effects were better than what they did with the original Star Wars, but that battle over the Death Star, that whole movie, and again, I'm treading over old ground, but it's just because it's fresh in my mind, and I watched A New Hope and then the first half of Empire Strikes Back. I'm going to finish that later today. But just watching that attack on the Death Star, and I'm big into space battles. If you've read my book Embark, you know, because that's the core. I mean, most of all the action sequences have to do with flying in some way, shape, or form. I love the mythology of Star Wars. I love what they're doing with the sequel trilogy with Reylo. We'll talk about that later in the show. But I just am a big fan of the space battles. And watching that attack on the Death Star, I mean, considering this is a movie made back in 1976, released in 77, it is still just so entertaining. And I love the simplicity of that movie. I really, really do. I love how easy, and I know it sounds weird, but not easy to follow, but it is easy to follow. It's just a simple, straightforward, good versus evil adventure film with clear goals. And most of the Star Wars movies are like that. You know, the middle chapters have the details where things have to get twisted and turned around and characters have to grow. That was certainly the case for Attack of the Clones, for Empire Strikes Back, and for The Last Jedi. And when you get to those final acts, Revenge of the Sith being sort of the odd one, because that was such a personal story. But when you look at Return of the Jedi and what we're most likely going to get, maybe, which we'll talk about later on in the show, with Episode 9, because I want to talk about where Episode 9 is heading from the standpoint of what they won't be doing, at least in my opinion. But that final battle on the Death Star is just so ridiculously entertaining. It really is. I enjoy it so much, and every single time I watch it, I sit back and just in awe that even with all of the ways that modern filmmaking and technology has vastly improved films and special effects, where you can do pretty much anything. Here you have a film that was, arguably speaking, upgraded in the 90s, but still was made back in 1977, released in 76 and 77, and it still is just, it stands up there with the best of them. Look, compare it to a movie like Aquaman. And I liked Aquaman. I preferred Bumblebee. Bumblebee is great, by the way. Again, very straightforward, simple, made me feel like I was a 15-year-old again, sitting in a movie theater watching an Amblin film. But you look at Aquaman, and yeah, it was fun, but my gosh, man, what just a barrage of CGI technology, and just, man, it was too much to take in. There's a point where you just kind of go, I know it's Avatar underwater, but even Avatar was simple in its viewing, and just, Aquaman was just a cinematic kind of mess. And I really do appreciate those movies that are very sort of straightforward. Here is the plot, and we're going to watch it. We're going to watch it play out. It's one of the things that I love about my Star Wars so much. So, all right, I wiped out a bit on that, but I didn't want to talk a bit about it because that's been my current viewing experience. I watched The Last Jedi the other night. It was a couple nights ago because, like I said, I've been on vacation, so I've been watching other movies in between, but was really in the mood to sit down and watch The Last Jedi and just, again, thoroughly enjoy that movie. The level of angst that still continues against The Last Jedi is so befuddling to me, which really does make me wonder how people are going to go and react to Episode 9. And so, you know what, let's go ahead and go there now. I'm going to take things a little bit out of order. I want to talk about Force Ghosts and some old ideas that Lucasfilm, that George Lucas had. But I do want to talk quite a bit about Reylo and the sequel trilogy in Episode 9. So let's go ahead and get right into it.
This is not going to go the way you think.
We haven't had, we're heading towards New Year's now, and nothing. We don't have a title yet for Episode 9. Obviously, no teaser for Episode 9. I really thought we'd get something before the end of the year, and that doesn't seem to be the case. I really don't expect that we're going to be getting anything. And if I had to guess now, I take back everything that I said before about my predictions of when we would be seeing certain things, and at the moment, it really does look like they're sticking to former schedules as of right now, which means that we'll probably end up getting the title sometime in January, and then we'll end up getting that teaser, sometime around April with the full trailer later in the year. There's still a part of me that thinks that they'll do more and that they should do more. I know that the fandom right now is clamoring for it. If you're on social media, you can tell there's some individuals out there that are talking about little bits and pieces that they know, including Peter Serretta over at Slash Film. And I'm patting myself on the back for this one, by the way. I'll explain. But Peter Serretta over at Slash Film put out a tweet saying that if you wanted to see some of the ideas for Episode 9, go back and look at the early artwork from the Force Awakens art book, and you'll find stuff there, and then went on to say, I'll explain more later. It was really stupidly, I'll just be honest, it was stupidly cryptic, and I posted as much on Reddit where I saw the post, was that it felt very clickbaity. Like, one, either Peter Serretta from Slash Film is privy to information he didn't want to share, which in my opinion, if you're trying to protect a source, okay, but that source probably knows that you're teasing the way that you are on Twitter, So you might as well go ahead and point to, hey, check out page 45 of the Force Awakens art book, and you'll get an idea of what they'll be using. Or he's simply guessing and just trying to drive more clicks and podcasts listened to for Slash Film. Because it's a pretty easy deduction to make that there's going to be old The Force Awakens concept art used for Episode 9, considering that JJ is coming back. That makes a lot of sense. Todd Fisher, Carrie's brother, was on Good Morning America talking about the footage used that will be used in Episode 9, that is used in Episode 9 of Carrie Fisher, that there was an abundance that they could use from The Force Awakens. There was also a bunch that they could use from The Last Jedi. I've given my thoughts before about how, in my opinion, Carrie Fisher looks dramatically different from both films, so I'm curious, or her face does. I'm curious to see how they're going to remedy that. I did an appearance on the Knights of Vader podcast, which is going to be out, I believe, sometime around the first of the year. They were going to have it out this weekend, but they delayed it, which is totally fine. But I love going on the podcast for those guys. Knights of Vader podcast is fantastic. But we were talking on there, and I wasn't aware that apparently there was way more reshoots for The Force Awakens than I was aware of, and apparently much of those reshoots. Because of those reshoots, there's a lot of footage of Carrie Fisher that was not used from The Force Awakens, which they ended up rolling into the storyline potentially for Episode 9. There's also a leak this morning of somebody who posted on Twitter, and I'm just kind of giving you the quick rundown before I get into my thoughts of where I think Episode 9 is going. But an individual on Twitter said, I got to say something here, but take it with a grain of salt, sand, whatever the saying is. I have a friend connected to Lucasfilm who said the battle plot of 9 reminds them of Pocahontas. Last year they said that 8 reminded them of Kingdom Hearts. And I said it was very much Kingdom Hearts. Now, I don't know what the correlation is with Kingdom Hearts, and for those of you that comment on YouTube or drop me an email to talkshownerd@gmail.com, feel free to fill in the gaps on what that means. Looking at the thread on Reddit about this woman's post, though, Pojo Jima from Star Wars Newsnet.com, or is it Star Wars Newsnet.net? I don't know. Anyways, Pojo Jima from Star Wars Newsnet says, Pocahontas ends with a ceasefire after someone of great importance to the plot has been mortally wounded protecting the protagonist. If this is a one-to-one translation of that, which I doubt it would be, then Ben Solo sacrifices his life in a way that would save Rey to end the war, or it could be the other way around, or maybe it doesn't have anything to do with Ben or Rey. Somebody wrote in, Leia seems more likely, considering her death would likely affect Kylo. Leia sacrifices her life to save Kylo, most likely while using the sledgehammer super weapon, which would also serve as a callback to how her friend Holdo died. And that was the big talk of the reshoots for The Force Awakens, because if you did go into the Force Awakens art book, you know that there was a whole theme of the sledgehammer that was able to penetrate the shields of a planet or something being protected by shields. So that would make sense. Somebody else wrote, given the plot of Pocahontas literally revolves around 2 romantic lovers, I seriously doubt this. It's more likely going to be Rey pulling a Pocahontas protecting John Smith from execution moment with Ben Solo / Kylo Ren. They were doubting the comments made from other individuals about Leia, not that it would revolve around 2 individuals being romantic. This is especially evident when you consider the romantic song duet If I Never Knew You, which was fully animated for the original version of Pocahontas, but ultimately cut from the theatrical release for time length purposes. Somebody else wrote, if you read the tea leaves, in the new Galaxy's Edge park, Kylo is featured heavily. However, Rey is not. That almost makes me wonder if Rey is the one who sacrifices. Maybe this is overanalyzing, just something I noticed on the official promo material. Somebody else went on to say it's probably, hold on here. Here we go. It's probably more like it's cheaper to use Kylo since they don't have to worry about face royalties. Okay, someone's just commenting on the park stuff. John Smith survives Pocahontas, so no one actually has to die. Somebody also made a comment about Avatar in the end of Avatar, and how that ends with essentially a ceasefire, right? where you have the corporation being marched off by the Na'vi at the end of the film. It's not a total destruction of the enemy doing that thing with my fingers. And actually, the Avatar scenario works rather interesting because, you know, the corporation isn't necessarily benevolent by any stretch of the imagination, right? But it does sort of echo the First Order in a sense that, and this is what I wanted to get to, in a sense, the First Order hasn't taken over the galaxy. Okay, so let me stop right here at this point. And let me land on this and flesh this out before I get into how the sequel trilogy was always going to be Reylo from the start. Okay? And that was by design. I'm more and more convinced of this now. When you look at the 9 movies altogether and you look at the core of each set of movies, I think without knowing 9, but knowing like comments like the Pocahontas comment here, and where the story is currently, and watching Last Jedi again, I'm firmly in the Reylo camp. I always have been, but I'm more and more convinced now that was the design of this thing. And even when you go back, like I mentioned on the last episode in 151, when you go back and listen to the commentary from J.J. Abrams, he's very sort of keen to use certain language about that relationship and how it's going to be challenged and interesting between Ben and Rey moving forward. And I think that's always been because of the two's connection not being blood related. But real quick, let me go to the whole idea of the First Order and how Episode 9 is going to end and how it's going to be different. This sequel trilogy is very different from the other trilogies, right? Regardless of how J.J. Abrams created The Force Awakens and how it has those mirrors and those echoes directly and indirectly to the entire original trilogy, the story that it told was drastically different, right? Sure, you have a protagonist, much like Luke, found on a planet, much like Tatooine. Sure, you have them defeating the bad guys in an opening attack on a super weapon. Okay, all very similar. But when you get into the core of the story of the characters that we're talking about, that's where the big deviation takes place. All of those other items, to me, are sort of the fan service, doing that thing with my fingers, and not in a bad way, but a fan service to the general audience of Star Wars is back, and this is how we're going to bring it back to you by reminding a lot of you and giving you the nostalgia feels and having a story that plays out much like the previous stories did. But at the core of this thing, we're going to change things up. And I also believe that this is how and why so many people have been why people have been so vocal, because it's not the majority, why people have been so vocal against The Last Jedi, because Rian Johnson really zeroed in on what J.J. Abrams set up. You don't have an empire like we did in the original trilogy. You don't even have a republic anymore in the way that we did in the prequel trilogy. What you have is the remnants of what's left over post Return of the Jedi. From what we know about how the Empire was forced into the unknown regions, and from there, the First Order came about. If we've learned anything from Resistance, the new cartoon, it's that, sure, the First Order was looked upon and feared, but they weren't taking over everything. They were working and aligning themselves, right? This is much, much different than the Empire taking the Republic and turning it into the Emperor. Right, this is much different than Darth Sidious Palpatine taking the Republic and turning it into the First Galactic Empire, which immediately grants him power over the entire galaxy. Because now he is the ruler. So you don't even have to go and conquer worlds. You've already done that. When you get to the sequel trilogy, no, we have a completely different ballgame. First off, you have, rather rapidly, you have the First Order seeing their first attempts to take over the galaxy by wiping out the Republic. But the reality is, because The Last Jedi takes place so quickly right after that, you don't have the First Order taking over regions. You have a small band of individuals pushing back against a group that wants to take over but has not done it yet. So, to resolve the First Order problem is a heck of a lot easier than it is to bring down the Empire. Because you don't have a faction that has gone and taken over everything. And the big leak that's taken place this week has been John Boyega in an interview saying that, and confirming that there's basically a year between the two films. That's not enough time for the First Order to go and take over the galaxy. It is enough time for them to try to. So, when you double back to this idea that it's going to end in sort of a Pocahontas way with this personal relationship and sacrifice ending the war, then yeah, I can totally see that happening. A couple of individuals, much in the same way you had the resolving of defeating the Empire by killing the Emperor in Return of the Jedi, it's way easier now because with these two individuals sacrificing themselves, you can disband the First Order and defeat them rather easily by just getting out, just getting rid of the chain of command. There isn't any large group or remnants parked anywhere else in the galaxy, unless Kylo really does go and take over a bunch of the galaxy, and I imagine that's where this movie's going to start. I imagine that Episode 9 is going to be the First Order has been expanding their reach, trying to take over systems as the systems push back. You know, the Resistance / Rebels now are trying to get a group together to finally take down the First Order, or to take down the First Order before they succeed in conquering the galaxy. So there's your bigger picture core. What I want to get into next is how Reylo has been the sequel trilogy from the start of this whole thing and how it was always designed to be that way. Before I do, though, I do want to talk a little bit about what it is that you're wearing. Because guess what? Mack Weldon, right? And what you can purchase at MackWeldon.com, it's actually better than what you're wearing right now. Unless you're wearing Mack Weldon, right? Mack Weldon, it's a premium men's essentials brand that believes in smart design and premium fabrics. Look, there is such a huge difference in putting on a quality-made shirt versus something you just bought off the rack at a store. Mack Weldon will be the most comfortable underwear, socks, shirts. Take it from me. I've worn their shirts. They're amazing. You feel amazing in them. Undershirts, hoodies, and sweatpants that you will ever wear. And look, they are so confident over at MackWeldon.com that they offer you up this guarantee. If you don't like the first pair of whatever you order off of MackWeldon.com, you can keep it, and they're still going to give you a refund, no questions asked. Go to the website. It's really easy to navigate. You're certain to find something that you want to get, whether it's for you or for somebody else. You've got some gift cards. You've got some Christmas money. Go to MackWeldon.com and treat yourself to some fantastic products that you will not be disappointed by, and take advantage of their guarantee. Plus, you get 20% off your first order when you visit MackWeldon.com and you enter the promo code MNW at checkout. So again, go to MackWeldon.com. Search through the website. You'll find it's an amazing website. It really is a pleasure to just go on there and see all of the different items that they have available. And these are items that perform well too, right? Find something you like and give it a chance. And use that promo code MNW at MackWeldon.com. And again, you can get 20% off your very first order. And if you don't like it, you can keep it, right? And they'll still refund you your money. How fantastic is that?
Let the past die. Kill it. If you have to. That's the only way to become what you were meant to be.
We don't have a boy searching for answers or redemption of his father in the sequel trilogy. We don't have an empire that has taken over everything in the galaxy that needs to be toppled. What we have here is a First Order that wants to take over the galaxy, who now has a supreme leader in a very conflicted young man, who was the son of one of the most powerful Force families of Princess Leia, right? Luke Skywalker, and the son of, a relative of Luke Skywalker, son of Leia and Han Solo, who now has been disenfranchised by this girl who's bested him, right? Who refused his call to join him in ruling the galaxy and is probably pretty angry about it. That's what needs to be resolved here. I firmly believe that Rey was telling the truth, and so was Kylo when they said that your parents were nobody. Because the story isn't about Rey's parents in the way that it was about Luke and Leia's dad in Anakin Skywalker and Vader. No, the story is about Rey being the light, rising up to meet the darkness in Kylo Ren, and Kylo Ren being the last of the Skywalkers, next to Princess Leia, dealing with his own personal conflicts. That was set up from the beginning. There's, Girls with Saber podcast. I mean, all the podcasts out there, right? The Balance podcast. I mean, a bunch of them. You guys have been on top of this way more than I have, but I'm just becoming more and more convinced of this. The sequel trilogy was always going to be a Reylo, a Star Wars story. And that's how it was going to separate itself out from the other trilogy. The prequel trilogy was about Anakin Skywalker, his rise and fall. The original trilogy was about Luke Skywalker and the adventure that the hero's journey that he chose to go on. Right? The sequel trilogy is about Rey, her hero journey, and Rey and Kylo Ren. And how they are going to resolve all of this that's been taking place for decades over the course of these nine movies. That's what this story was going to always be about. And I think what people have gotten so upset about with The Last Jedi is that confirms something that they didn't want. Because that's what The Last Jedi is when you watch it. Man, it's Reylo, a Star Wars story. Rian Johnson knew going into it, and I believe this was the plan. You go back again and listen to the commentary from J.J. Abrams. I believe that this was the plan all along. All along, it was going to be about these two individuals and how these two individuals were going to be the ones to finally bring some type of balance to the galaxy to close out this Skywalker saga. And Ben is going to play a pivotal role in having that happen, along with Rey. But much in the same way that the original trilogy was about Luke, but really about Vader and his total redemption, the sequel trilogy is about Rey. It's really about Kylo and Kylo Ren, Ben Solo, and him figuring this whole thing out. And finally bringing some balance not only to the galaxy, but also to the Skywalker family. And I really do think that one of the big reasons why people, again, have such a hard time with The Last Jedi is because Rian Johnson doubled down on that. He basically said, all right, we know where this is roughly going in 9. Kylo Ren is the most interesting character to me. We know that these two have to develop. This is a story where these two individuals become conflicted with their relationship, and that's what the story is going to be about. And that's why I love The Last Jedi for that. Those moments with Rey and with Ben are just some of the best in Star Wars. That's what makes that battle with the Praetorian Guard so great, and the finale of that and Rey's rejection of Ben so gut-wrenching. Her closing the door at the end of it. It's just a perfect setup for 9. I do think that J.J. Abrams is going to provide us with some visual markers and cues reminiscent to Return of the Jedi. We already know that from some of the behind-the-scenes stuff that we've seen. So I firmly expect that we're going to see that. But I also do think that we're going to end up getting something very different and unique because maybe we'll have some type of super weapon, but I doubt it. But because the story is not one where you have a galaxy that is under control of this massive regime, right? No, you have a regime that wants to control everything and a guy at its top right now that is incredibly conflicted. And it's going to play a pivotal role in putting an end to all of it, all the conflict. So I know I was kind of all over the place with that, and hopefully you were able to pull some stuff from it, and I'm curious to get your thoughts if you want to comment on the YouTube channel or drop me an email, talkshownerd at gmail.com. I'm excited for what this trilogy is going to end up being at the end, and I think there's a good possibility, at least for me personally, because I'm such a hopeless romantic, that this could end up being my favorite Star Wars trilogy of all of them. It needed to be unique in certain ways, and this is how they decided to make it unique. It may not be in a way that all the fans will love it, but the ones that do are really going to love it, and that's really what I'm trying to say. The prequel trilogy was Anakin, his rise and fall. The sequel trilogy was the hero's journey with Luke, and the original trilogy and the sequel trilogy was going to be about Reylo. This couple and their interactions with one another. All right, I want to visit one more thing before we get to listener feedback, and that is the idea of Force ghosts. Something popped into my head. A lot of talk about Force ghosts and whether or not we'll see an Anakin Skywalker or even an Obi-Wan Kenobi, a show back up played by Ewan McGregor in Episode 9. Something interesting I was reminded of. George Lucas, in his original drafts for Return of the Jedi and the original trilogy, if I'm not mistaken, and again, talkshownerd@gmail.com or drop me a comment on YouTube. I'm fairly certain that George Lucas had the idea that Force ghosts could interact in the real world and even go so far as to battle, right? They could battle. They could use lightsabers as Force ghosts. And that idea popped into my head in listening and reading some commentary by some other Star Wars fans. And given the fact that in The Last Jedi, you do actually see, and it's not the first time this has happened, by the way, you see Obi-Wan Kenobi like sit down on a rock at the end of Return of the Jedi, that kind of thing. But you not only have Yoda as a Force ghost manipulating the weather and bringing the lightning down, right, on Ahch-To, but you also have him bonk physically Luke in the nose with his cane. And that really made me wonder if whether or not that idea will be revisited, since it's already been established as canon, and it was one of George's original ideas. Where at the end of Episode 9, somehow we get some interaction with Force ghosts who end up stepping in to aid, to help out in the big finale. And again, that was just a quick thought on that. There were some comments about a Vader comic that was released that a lot of people have been talking about and talking about some imagery in that. But again, it just seemed to be an idea that could be revisited that would be really compelling, in my opinion, since that's already been established, although that might be lost on some individuals who don't pay close enough attention. Like, they really utilize that in Rebels quite a bit, right? But I'm not one to believe that they're going to go and use deep cuts from, even though they're canon, extra creative content outside the movies. Like the one time we have seen them do that was when Rian Johnson did the Force shipping between Rey and Kylo and having them communicate. We do know that actually came from a book from several years ago where they talked about the ability that Force users had to do that. So I think that it would be cool. I'd like to see it. So maybe they'll use it in 9. All right, let's get to some listener feedback.
Something inside me has always been there. But now it's awake. And I need help.
So, Eponine Reads says this: I just had an epiphany right on YouTube. It makes perfect sense that Anakin's lightsaber would be divided. He has 2 children, Luke and Leia. He will have 2 legacies, even if Luke doesn't have children, but carry on. Also like to mention about love letters to a prior movie. The Last Jedi is a love letter to The Empire Strikes Back, in my opinion, and but you get it. I do, and thank you for the comment. Stephen Cross Films says this: I really want to see an epic lightsaber battle between Rey and Kylo in 9. I also think that they should have a Ben Solo redemption because it's really about the Skywalker saga, and Ben is technically a Skywalker by blood. Yep, kind of, again, going back to what I've been saying this episode. Even Luke said that he would be with Kylo if he struck him down in anger in The Last Jedi. I think J.J. Abrams will do well with 9. Yeah, I do too, and I really do think that, and thanks, Stephen Cross, thanks for the comment. I really do think that JJ's going to knock 9 out of the park because of what Rian Johnson did. Like, I can't see J.J. Abrams being able to pull off what Rian Johnson did. I think Rian Johnson was, and I know people are going to disagree with me, especially if you don't like The Last Jedi. I think he was very brave in doing what he did. You watch that Director and the Jedi documentary, and you can see how nervous the guy was, even to the point where he completely redid the opening of the film because he just was like, "This isn't working." And Ron Bergman, his producer, had mentioned how he had to kind of be his support through some of the tougher times where he was dealing with, the movie and concern about whether or not it was going to actually work. And so I think because Rian Johnson did the heavy lifting for Episode 8, for The Last Jedi, that J.J. Abrams has been provided a great opportunity to really knock it out of the park, because J.J. Abrams does make great movies. Eponine writes, again, I don't know how far my comments are reaching, but Luke rushed to save his friends in The Empire Strikes Back, but Yoda held him back. In The Last Jedi, the young Padawan is begging for him to leave and help. She represents the recklessness that Luke used to be. It's another seduction of the dark side that is taunting Luke in the face of an innocent, sad face. This time, he digs his heels in and solves the problem by staying instead of going. In Return of the Jedi, Luke expressed regret as Yoda was dying, in my opinion. And, in my opinion, regret holds you down, and you focus on anything to keep you from making the same mistake again, to the detriment and possibly not making a mistake. Look, I don't want to go over the old ground again, but I love what Rian Johnson did with Luke, and I feel that it was exactly appropriate. It was exactly appropriate because it was Rian Johnson's interpretation of where Luke would have been, even though it was not the interpretation of a lot of fans. And that's where I think people get lost. Is it what I personally would have done with Luke? I don't know. I wasn't tasked with writing that story. I write my own stories, like Embark, which is available now, $2.99 in ebook, $12.99 for paperback. The audiobook should be available any day now. I'm just waiting for Amazon to approve it. But go to Amazon.com, search Jon Justice, and grab Embark. People are really enjoying it. The reviews have been fantastic, and I've already begun 10,000 words into the sequel. I am so excited for the sequel, you have no idea. I am way more excited for the sequel than I am the original story. And people really like the original story. So go pick up Embark on Amazon. I wasn't tasked with writing it. Rian Johnson was. And that was his interpretation based off of what he saw of Luke Skywalker in previous films. And to me, that's not a bad interpretation. It's a good interpretation. It is an interpretation, though, based off of the knowledge that he had. Somebody could have easily interpreted Luke to be somewhere else in his life, and that wasn't what Rian Johnson decided to do. All right, Zach writes this. If the Knights of Ren are all female, as the leak claims, I have a feeling that Kerry Russell is one of them, probably Kylo's lieutenant and the proxy leader of his steed. Having Rey having a similar saber to Kylo is such an interesting idea that I kind of hope it's true. I still firmly believe that there will be a redemption for Ben because of all the rumors of new Imperial villains just screams insurrection and betrayal in the First Order. TLJ wiped out half of the figureheads in the First Order, so a power vacuum now exists, and everyone with tyrannical ambitions will be gunning for the top spot. Hux definitely wants Kylo taken out, but he can't do it alone. I'm thinking he's going to turn the whole First Order against Kylo, probably teaming up with Richard E. Grant's character. That's an interesting scenario. Thanks for the comment. Zach, appreciate it. Stephanie S. writes this. Thank you for being so positive. Exclamation point. Thank you, Stephanie. No, I really do appreciate that. Anytime anybody takes time out to go and write, man, I appreciate it. Ella B. writes, what the helmet info says to me, Kylo's helmet was not put back together with staples, a la earlier Jedi Killer helmet concept, but rather it was glued back together in a kintsugi fashion. Imagine a broken vase being glued back together and then the cracks being decorated in gold, the purpose being to highlight the break, not as the end of an object's life, but as an example of its resilience and continued usefulness. And I only mentioned that in the previous show because of what somebody else had posted. I know the rumor is going around that he pieces it and glues it back together, so I agree with that. I can picture the Knights of Ren putting the helmet back together and presenting it to Kylo to remind him of who he was. Kylo might not actually put the helmet on. It could just be an object that symbolizes his dark side nature. And the stormtroopers who have the same helmet as Kylo, what if they are the Knights of Ren? Then the helmet would also remind Kylo of his affiliation with them. There's a lot of symbolism here that reminds me of Rey as well. She's a scavenger who's looking to fix broken things, so kintsugi would be perfect for her too. All right. Let's see. Let's go to Black-Eyed Lily. I'm so glad you referenced the moment in Return of the Jedi when Luke gives into his fear and anger as a mirror of what happened between him and Ben in The Last Jedi. I totally agree and have suggested this in various discussions about The Last Jedi. This is also where he tosses away the green saber after regaining himself. And while maybe it wasn't quite as flippant as the way that Luke tosses the saber over his shoulder in The Last Jedi, I still point to this moment for those who proclaim that Luke would never do such a thing. Luke's journey in The Last Jedi is one of my favorite things about the movie. In my opinion, it is such a satisfying end to his story arc, even while I look forward to Force Ghost in 9. All right, just got a time for a few more here. Miss Suki 777 says this: Happy Star Wars Christmas, John and all. Thank you, Miss Suki. I appreciate that. TLJ Sucks writes this. So I don't usually comment on negative ones, but this made me laugh. TLJ is a terrible film, in my opinion. The worst of all Star Wars entertainment. That being said, I respect those who love it. For me, the prequels are 100 times better. See, TLJ Sucks. Why can't more people that think The Last Jedi sucks be like you? That would be so nice if that were the case. I mean, it's not, but that would be so nice. All right, one more comment here, and this comes from Mitzi K. I don't think we are actually lacking a prophecy for the sequel trilogy in regards to episode number 151. We have that verse from the Journal of the Wills about refined Jedi sight, etc., etc., etc. I really think that is our prophecy. If we decipher exactly what it means, we will know everything the sequel trilogy was designed to achieve. Just my own opinion, but I will be surprised if it doesn't come up again in 9. I just want the marketing for 9 to begin. My body is ready. My body is ready. And I know the leaks are beginning to ramp up, and we're in the middle of this holiday week heading into the new year, but we're so close. We're less than a year away from this movie now, and a few days away from 2019, the year of episode 9. This is going to be a really fun year. Did you hear IG-88 is going to be in The Mandalorian? Jon Favreau ended up posting that. That's pretty cool. A lot of Mandalorian stuff out there, too. But when you consider we have the return to Clone Wars, the Mandalorian's coming out, and then all the hype leading up to Episode 9, man, I am so absolutely excited for this year. You have no idea. And that's it for this episode of My Nerd World, the Star Wars podcast. Again, go to macweldon.com. Get 20% off your first order by using the promo code MNW. And if you haven't yet, I hope you'll go pick up Embark. I'm so excited that people are enjoying the story and really liking it. The reviews have been fantastic. Like I said, I've started the next book. 10,000 words in, and already just super psyched to take these characters to another place and being able to do my own world building, and the fact that people have been getting into it. It's just been an absolute thrill to me. So if you haven't yet, Amazon.com, Embark. Go and pick it up. EMBARK, Jon Jon Justice. Again, $2.99 for the ebook. The audiobook will be available any day. That's 11 and a half hours of entertainment when it's available, which should be any day now. Again, I'm just waiting for Amazon to approve the audio. And then $12.99 for the paperback. And if you buy the paperback, you can actually get the ebook for free. So it's kind of a bonus. So go to Amazon and pick it up. I hope you had a fantastic Christmas. I hope you have an amazing new year. And I will talk to you again with episode number 152 next week as we start 2019 and the year of episode 9. May the Force be with you for the end of this year and all of next year. And I'll talk to you again real soon. talkshownerd@gmail.com is where you can email me. And have a great one. Thanks for listening. Thanks for downloading. Bye.
The Force will be with you. Always.
My Nerd World.